So what guys get from that is really simple. They get to, number one, observe how other men think about things and how they've navigated similar challenges. And number two, they get empathy. And that's the biggest one because men don't get a lot of that. And the most powerful two words in the English language are me too. And so that's what guys say is they'll tell us the biggest takeaway is they've learned by just observing how to communicate better. They take that out into their life. And then number two is just like feeling like they're not alone, like they're not some crazy person, the only crazy person with these challenges.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Sean Galla, who brings men together to help them overcome themselves. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from Will and Ariel Durant. The men who can manage men manage the men who can manage only things. And the men who can manage money manage all. How are you at managing your money and yourself? Those are two skills they don't teach in school, and yet they're the ones we need to have a great life. We've taught you the basics of money, and we continue to teach you how to manage yourself. Men are generally bad about being vulnerable, and that's what today is all about. Before we get to that, let's review last week's action step, which was to ask yourself 4 questions. What lights me up? What skills do I have? What problem am I uniquely able to solve? Who are the people I like to hang around? 4 simple questions. Did you find some quiet time and ask them to yourself and keep doing that? Over time, you start to find the path forward. And then you just take one baby step, and then another. And then the universe conspires to help you build that amazing future. I recently read a quote in a book. It said, "Wanted reformers, not of others, but of themselves." That's what this is all about. Me reforming myself. You can't see the full journey over my life, but it's been massive. And I tell you, it continues. There's a lot of power in groups and masterminds to help you get and stay on track and continue to do this. I'm part of a few currently, each with a different purpose. They come and they go as I grow and my needs change. So the question is, who are your go-to people? And do they push you forward in the direction you want to go? That's our episode today with Sean Galla. He spent his 20s pursuing his dreams as a professional DJ, serial entrepreneur, lived in Mexico for 5 years where he learned Spanish and surfed every day. From the outside, he looked like he was living a dream life. In reality, along the way, he faced many adversities. These adversities gave him depth and molded him into an ideal facilitator of men's circles. This made him value community and meaningful conversations. Let's have a meaningful conversation with Sean. Here he is. Welcome to Richer Soul, Sean Galla. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. Excited to be here.
and I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is not very much. I grew up in what is now a really fancy neighborhood, but back then was like just a normal middle-class suburb of Vancouver, Canada. And so we had a lovely life growing up. My family was always pretty tight with money. I wouldn't say we ever lacked anything, but we also, my parents drove older, beat up cars and had to sell all their things, like all their boat, their little fishing boat and other things to be able to have kids. And so there was like a lot of frugalness and scarcity around money, even though we weren't by any means starving. There was a lot of, just scarcity is probably the right word. So that's the environment I grew up in there. And just a lot of like money doesn't grow on trees, or, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. That's still a joke from my parents even today. I'll tell them I bought a new surfboard or something, and my dad will joke, hey, you can't afford that. And school didn't help much better, I went to college, I went to business school and learned some basic accounting. Beyond that, there was nothing around personal finance, nothing around how to think about money, nothing around abundance versus scarcity mindset with money. So it's kind of on my own. And as a result, struggle with money for most of my life until recently.
Interesting. What changed recently?
I think it was understanding money better. Also just like using more of my strengths in the workplace and in my career, and really leveraging those, and that resulting in being more valuable.
The more value we create, the more money right? That's kind of the way it works.
Exactly.
That is really what it's all about. And it's that thing that nobody teaches.
Yeah. Nobody's teaching it. Like, for example, in my first year of university, I started a business. It was an online music store for DJs, because I was DJing at the time professionally, and realized that nobody was selling music online. So even before Napster came out, we launched an online music store that sold music files. And to do that, we ended up taking on a whole bunch of money. We ended up taking on a whole bunch of business loans. I think in total it was $450,000, which is a lot for a 20-year-old. And nobody told me that wasn't a good idea, or that maybe I should prove the business model first or anything. They just said, yeah, great. You're being an entrepreneur. You're taking a big swing. And of course, the business didn't work out. And then I went personally bankrupt, and that haunted me for like 10 years. So nobody educated me on finances at all.
How did you raise $450,000 as a college kid?
It was at the time when money was easy to get from the banks, especially for small businesses in Canada. And I just happened to win a business plan competition. Some professor of mine was like, hey, go into this, you're doing a business, you have a business plan already, you might as well throw it in the ring for this business plan competition. And I won. And as a part of that, part of it was I could have some conversations about funding with the Business Development Bank of Canada. And so they basically said, we can do equity or we can do a loan. And I didn't really understand that I was signing for the loan personally. So I said, yeah, let's do debt, and took on a bunch of money there.
So they didn't teach you much in the entrepreneurial program.
No, not in high school, not at home, not in the entrepreneurial program. I basically had to fail my way forward until I learned about money.
And that's okay to keep failing forward, as long as you keep going forward and you keep overcoming it and taking the next step.
And learning the lessons, like I did. The good news is that I did learn the lessons. After that, I learned about not taking on debt. I learned how to bootstrap a business. I learned how to save and and then once I actually fully stepped into my career, which is also just an age thing, I don't know many people that make a lot of money when they're in their like late 20s or even early 30s, especially men that typically hit their stride in their 40s. So, now I'm 37 and doing just fine.
That's good to hear. So you started off as a DJ in college, and then you had some other interesting journeys along the way.
Yeah. A lot of entrepreneurial ventures, a lot of unconventional lifestyle stuff. I could ramble about them. I'm not sure if there's any that stand out for you in particular.
Let's ramble a little. Tell me about what happened between college and 37 and, the short story.
Yeah. Short version is I started that business. It failed. Sold cars for like 6 months, just trying to get by, thinking I could learn about sales. It was a good experience. And I did okay at it, but realized that nobody's teaching how to DJ online. started the first online DJ school called howtodjfast.com, which is still live today. That made just enough money where I could, pay my bills basically. And I fell in love with a woman who was from Spain, and she was managing a hotel in Vancouver. And she said, "Hey, there's a position open in Mexico. Would you like to go down and live in Mexico?" And I said, "Yeah, I've always wanted to learn how to surf." Great. So because I had an online business, I was able to move to Mexico. We packed up the car 2 weeks later and just drove down, and ended up spending 6 years there. So lived on the beach, learned Spanish, learned how to surf. Tried a couple other businesses down there that had mixed results. Some of them did okay, some of them failed. Sold one, and then happened to bring a bunch of guys down for a surf trip just to hang out, who are all entrepreneurs. We sat in a circle at the end of the trip, thinking it would be a business mastermind. Like, how can we contribute to each other? And the first guy says, "My wife's had 3 miscarriages, and I have no idea how to support her." And he started crying. And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect this. And anyway, one thing leads to another. Other guys shared personal stuff. And all of a sudden, it was more like a men's group. I was like, wow, I really like this. I enjoy it. It's meaningful. We get to do these fun trips together. So I started doing more of them. And then that, fast forward to today, I've been doing that for 12 years. And and now the current project is mensgroup.com. So for 10 years, I took entrepreneurs on adventure trips, and we had these men's groups called, we go heli skiing or surf trips or skydive trips or whatever, all over the world with guys all over the world. And then I sold that a few years ago and then launched mensgroup.com. And so I'm back up here in Canada doing that today.
It's nice to go on trips and have other people pay for them.
Yeah, I loved it. And to see guys actually talking about stuff they didn't get to talk about. So it was like meaningful and super fun, So it was a great experience. But honestly, the cash, the financial management of that business wasn't great either. So still learning money lessons back then.
So how do you keep going in spite of all these setbacks?
It's a great question. I mean, the honest answer that people probably don't want to hear is like insecurity and trying to like prove myself, just like continuing to bash my head against the same wall and, family members and stuff. But like, maybe this entrepreneurial thing isn't working for you. You could be making good money as a salesman or whatever. And I knew that was true, but I'm just this kind of person. It's almost like a disease where I want to be creating things, almost like an artist. I want to build things. I want to build things that I would find useful. And so I just had to keep going with it.
How did you deal with all the negative people?
It's a great question. I had a really hard time with it in the beginning because I was a people pleaser and I had a bit of low self-worth issues. So like that stuff would really get in there, especially from my family. But over time, I just realized that, through getting feedback from friends and my own self-exploration, through journaling, through reading books, through listening to podcasts, that like I am this kind of a person and like somebody who is really drawn to these kinds of projects and has these certain skills that a lot of people don't understand. And true, for a long time, it took me a while to figure out how that fit into the workplace, But I got to a point where I was like, well, this is who I am. And I appreciate that people care about me and they want to see me do well and they think they're helping me. But I started to keep those people that would give me direct feedback that wasn't supportive at arm's length, to be honest, whether that be family or friends or whatever. And
when you go your own direction, you have to have the courage to do that. Because while they think they're doing what's in your best interest, what they're really trying to do is keep you safe, not happy.
Yeah, and keep you with them. They're afraid of you changing and maybe growing in a different direction, or maybe you're making changes they haven't been able to and they feel uncomfortable. There's a lot of reasons why it can happen. I saw it happen with my girlfriend this past summer. She had some old friends from back where she's from come visit. And she was talking about some of the stuff she wanted to do, a podcast like yours, Rocky, some other things. And she used to be a nurse, and her friend said, but what about the benefits? That was like her first question, what about your benefits you're going to be losing? And what about the security? And this girl wanted to be supportive, but like every question she asked was subtly not supportive whatsoever. Like, and the energy that she's bringing to the conversation was not supportive. So that was an interesting thing to observe, and just how that can influence a person, because those questions made my girlfriend question her path. And from that, she learned that she has to be a bit more careful about who she shares that with and invest more in people who are supportive of the direction she wants to go in.
That makes a lot of sense. Most people are looking for safety and security, and they're willing to give up enjoyment and happiness and a great life to be secure. And that's a shame.
Yeah. And for good reason too, right? Because you look at my story and like, I haven't listed out 1/10 of the adversities I've gone through, right? Like sometimes, actually a lot of time, doing meaningful things or doing unconventional things means that you're going to face more bumps in the road because it's less of a well-worn path, you know? Especially if you're doing something new. It's like the first guy over the fence always takes it in the teeth, you know? So it's part of the journey. So I understand why people shy away from that. But yeah, I've learned and she's learned now that there's just no room for people that aren't going to be supportive because this stuff's so hard to do, you know, like anything meaningful, running your own business, doing this podcast, Rocky, getting it off the ground, a lot of energy, right?
So you just kind of walk away and you keep your distance. That's your solution. And find a better group.
Yeah, it sounds ruthless, but for me, it's like self-care. Mm-hmm. It really is a self-care thing because I've seen the research running men's groups. I know the research on community and the impact it can have, right? It's like, and there's been some great studies done that have said that a negative person in your life, somebody who's unsupportive of whatever you want to do, is 6 times more impactful than a positive person. So if somebody says a negative comment like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that, or why are you doing that, or whatever, like that will affect you 6 times more than somebody going, good job, or that's great. So, you know, it's a self-care thing, setting boundaries with people. And sometimes that means just not talking about that subject with them, but still having them in your life. Sometimes it means walking away entirely. Sometimes it means having a conversation. If you think this person is good for you in other ways, having a conversation saying, hey, I need you to be more supportive. But yeah, in some cases, that means deciding to move on.
Why do you think we listen to the negative at 6 times what we listen to the positive?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's the same reason why we are drawn to the inflammatory things in the news. You know, then all the media sites have figured out that we pay more attention to the blood and the drama and the chaos, right? And so, yeah, a threat is something that we need to pay attention to. Negative energy is is like people saying negative things. We tend to ruminate about them. Why is it that people only leave reviews for restaurants when they've had a bad experience for the most part? I don't know. You know, so it's all in that same territory.
Probably because it takes work to leave a review. And for most things in life, it's just a routine transaction, or it's nice. And it's like, why bother?
Yeah. Yeah, I think humans are, you know, we've been so successful as a species because we solve problems, right? And to solve a problem, you kind of got to focus on it and like, again, you know, hone in on it and kind of maybe even obsess about it a little bit. And so, yeah, I think there's this pull towards negativity as like a safety mechanism that we have.
It's a survival mechanism, I guess.
Survival mechanism is probably, yeah.
Because we're designed to survive, not thrive. Which is
exactly.
A shame.
It is. Yeah. So now I'm at the place where pretty much all my friends, aside from a few, are like doing really unique, inspiring things. And I haven't like designed it that way. Like I'm not closed off to having friends that are working corporate jobs or that are like, you know, I don't know, living very differently than me. But it's just, I'm typically drawn to people that share my values. And I think that's a good thing.
That it is. So let's take a step back. How is it that this group of men just started sharing personal stuff like that? Because that doesn't normally happen. Yeah,
it's a good question. And it comes back to my money journey, right? Because like a lot of it, for most of my working life from about 18 till about 28, I struggled financially. Couldn't figure out how my skills fit into the workplace. I felt like I was an odd duck, you know, didn't fit the mold. I probably should have been a counselor, to be honest, because that's my personality type. I just love having meaningful conversations like this. I love getting to know people and hearing their stories. Usually I'd be asking you a lot more questions, Rocky, because you're interviewing me. I'm rambling on here, but like, and I like talking about meaningful stuff, probably because I didn't have any of that in my own house. growing up, it was very like, don't talk about it. There's nothing to talk about, everything's fine. So I just naturally have those skill sets. So as I started to acknowledge that and understand that that was a natural gift of mine and something that I didn't feel like work, I started to exercise those muscles more. And then all of a sudden, like, that's when financial things started to click. And so to go back and answer your question of like, how did I get these guys to talk, or why did that happen? Well, I think it's because I intuitively knew how to create an environment where people would feel safe to talk. And it's really simple. As long as people feel like they're not going to get ridiculed for sharing, they will. The problem is that guys feel very scared to share because they've been ridiculed their whole lives. So in this case, they shared an adventure for 3 days, which bonds them. They feel close, they trust each other. And then at the end, I shared vulnerable stuff first. And that was really the key, because that set the stage. I was sharing as examples some stuff that I was going through, and because I wanted to make the guys feel safe to share anything. And sure enough, that's what worked. And that's what still works today. We will make sure that the first guy who talks has the most emotional, personal thing typically. Because then all the rest of the guys they see how guys respond to that and they go, oh, okay, he wasn't ridiculed. I feel safe to share.
Men don't normally talk emotionally, do they?
No.
Why is that?
Terrified. If I've learned anything from running men's groups over the last 12 years, it's that every guy, doesn't matter if we have 300-pound biker bros, we have guys who are in gangs, we have guys calling in from jail, we have hotshot investment bankers, pro athletes, millionaire doctors in our men's groups. They all want to share whatever's on their mind. They're just scared because their whole life they were told that it was weak to share that kind of stuff, or that they're gay if they get emotional or whatever, And I experienced that growing up playing hockey. Like, you didn't show emotion in the dressing room or else everybody would laugh at you. And my dad would, if I cried, he'd go, tough enough. If I got angry, totally fine. If I got angry and hit some kid in hockey, acceptable. So anger is acceptable. Certain things are acceptable. Emotion is acceptable in brief windows, like in sports, when you score a big goal or something, you can hug your friend. But aside from that, it makes you weak. It makes you not a worthy partner. So guys are really afraid to share. They just assume they're going to get ridiculed.
That's a shame. And it's good that you're creating a space for them to be able to talk.
Does that make sense to you?
It makes total sense to me. Out of curiosity, when they start to share, what are the big themes that you see?
Yeah, good question. It's just a lot of everyday guy stuff. It's like normal situations that we all face. These guys and a lot of guys just don't have a place to talk about it. It's a lot of stuff like being a new dad. That's like new territory where the guys don't have the skills or experience. They don't have anybody to talk to about it really. And so of course they need to ask somebody, but there's not a lot of resources for that. So it's like being a new dad. It's saving a relationship, saving a marriage, learning to communicate better, recovering from a breakup, like a divorce or breakup or whatever, in a healthy way. Because a lot of guys, their friends will say, just go out and get back on the horse, sleep around, drink beer, party. But a lot of guys know that's not, that they want to do it in a more healthy way. So they're looking for that. We get a lot of guys with porn addiction, which is a common one. And then boundary setting. That's huge. Like, a lot of guys consider themselves to be nice guys that have kind of been walked over by romantic partners or friends or coworkers. And so they want to learn how to set boundaries. Those are the big ones.
Money doesn't come up?
It's more interpersonal stuff, and money is a constant topic, but usually money is secondary to the relationships that the money is affecting.
Interesting.
It's a lot of interpersonal stuff, which is what you and I are also dealing with all the time. Oh, I had this weird conversation with a friend. Oh, this partner didn't, got into a conflict with them or whatever. Yeah, people stuff.
So you have the men's group. They solve their one problem. Then what happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. like probably like 20 or 30% of the guys that come in just dump and run. They like come in and solve their problem and then take off. The rest of them realize, can I swear? By the way, is that a thing? Holy shit. I don't have any friends to talk to about this stuff. And that's not a good thing. A lot of men invest in their relationship, and their family and their work. And typically after college, they don't really, like, their numbers of friends only goes down, right? They don't really make new friends. And so I think a lot of guys, once they have these conversations, they kind of realize, oh, wow, I've really been lacking this. And that's not good for my well-being.
I almost challenge, do they have friends or do they have acquaintances? Like you
Yes.
get together to watch a football game, but nobody's
talking about anything.
Nobody's talking about anything.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's exact experience for guys. And we have guys coming into Men's Group who are quite popular by all standards, like men who have a lot of acquaintances, men who are celebrities, who like have no shortage of people in their lives, but they don't feel safe sharing what's on their mind or the personal situations they find themselves in. And I think you're right. There are more acquaintances in that case.
It doesn't surprise me.
Why not?
Because it seems to be culturally what happens in America. I think between work, kids, and just the overall culture, it's just what it is.
Yes.
And you have to be intentional with it. And if you're not, then, I mean, let's face it, after college, it becomes what? Work. And then when you have kids and they start to get older, it's almost like you become friends with the kids' parents because you're going to the same events. But none of that is intentional. It's all, hey, this is the lottery of who I work with or who's my neighbor. And I live a unique lifestyle in that I know all my neighbors. We hang out and do things, but I don't think that's normal.
No, that's very healthy.
Yeah, same thing at work or with your kids' parents. So none of that is surprising.
Yeah, they did this great study. I forget which university it was in the States, but they went around the streets and surveyed a lot of men. And 40 years ago, on average, men said they had I think it's 4.5. I was trying to figure out it was 4 or 5, but somewhere in there, confidants in their life. 4 or 5 people besides their romantic partner who they could actually talk to about money issues or personal relationship conflicts or any of these things that are on our minds day to day, right? And they redid this study 3 years ago. Guess what the average number is today in North America?
A half?
Yeah, 0.5. Good guess. Great guess. Which means that literally half the men in North America have nobody to talk to.
Yeah, that it doesn't surprise, because if you even think about it, the things that used to be traditional are no longer the case. Like people aren't living in their hometowns per se. They move apart. So you lose all of that. Religious connections have dropped away. There's not the community within the religious community like they're supposed to be.
Yes.
There are not that many men's organizations that are fraternal anymore. Like there used to be a ton of fraternal men's organizations. Today, I don't see that many unless they're centered around drinking.
Yes.
And most of what I see in the fraternal organizations are guys in their 70s.
Yeah.
You don't see that often a bunch of guys in their 30s or 40s. And if you see a bunch of younger guys getting together, it's all based around activity.
Yes.
Meaning we're playing a game. It's not based around a conversation, being real, having those types of, none of those conversations going on.
No, exactly. No. And I think this is, you look at very simple day-to-day things. It's like money issues, right? Like part of the reason why I've been able to build wealth in the past couple of years is because I talk to my friends about how they think about money, how they what they do with their money and how they protect their money and stuff. And without that, you're just left in this weird pressure cooker of like your own emotions, trying to figure out your way through the dark without a flashlight. And it's no wonder that, for men, like 80% of suicides in North America are men. 98% of people in jail are men. The illicity rate is much higher for men. There's all these like stats that show that men aren't doing that well, and people wonder why men are acting out in all these terrible ways that came up in Me Too and these kinds of things, or Will Smith slapping somebody in the Oscars. And it's like, because men are privately like, Joe Rogan has this great quote. It's like, most men live in quiet desperation.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's actually a Henry David Thoreau quote, but Joe Rogan shared it. And I was like, yeah, it's true. And I think it directly relates back to money, because like money is one of those topics that has a lot of weird emotions around it, and people don't want to talk about it and share. People have different levels of privacy and stuff. People don't want to be judged for having money or not having money. So yeah, it's another one of those things that needs to get talked about.
I've heard a similar quote, and I'm trying to, most people, it's something along the lines of most people live a long life, but die very early.
Oh, interesting.
And I'll have to find the exact quote, but it's basically, while you're alive, you're not living. You're just going through the motions. And
I would say for most people, that's true. Most people I see around me, that's true.
And so I've known this and this is happening societally, especially for, I'm not going to call them younger men because they're not, they're boys. Mm. Societally, what we're seeing is a shift. There's so much of a focus on girls that young men who are not at the top or at the bottom, the middle of the pack is just getting left behind. Those at the bottom get help because we need to push them up. Those at the top get the accolades, but the majority, the 80% in the middle, get ignored. And I think as you're looking at college admissions right now, the trend is more women are going to college than men, percentage-wise.
Yeah, many academics, women are thriving compared to men. Yeah.
And then the second half of that, nowadays, the conversation is, what do you do when she makes more?
Right.
So now you've got an emotional thing because historically, hey, men are supposed to be the breadwinner. Mm-hmm. And if you can't be the breadwinner, and if you are somewhat left behind in that, then that causes a whole nother level of emotional issues.
It does. Yeah, a lot of men find that very confronting.
So what types of things do you do to help them? Like, how does being part of the group help them improve in their lives? So in the groups, we don't actually coach. We as an organization don't do much beyond just creating the room that they want to be in with other guys going through similar things. So we've learned the relevance is everything. So a guy who's dealing with debt issues, he wants to talk about that. The guys that are going through divorces, they want to talk about that. Guys that are trying to figure out spirituality and purpose, they want to talk about that. And so we just create, meetings just like this on Zoom or whatever, where, guys can do that. And so we don't really do a lot of coaching or a lot of anything like that. We just have a very simple format. And it's like guys go around the circle, they share how the last 2 weeks have been. And then they say, there's this topic that I'd like to get into. And guys can say, no, there's nothing this week. But some guy might say, yeah, my communication with my wife has been poor, or, my business is suffering or whatever. And then we can talk about those things the rest of the meeting. So what guys get from that is really simple. They get to, number one, observe how other men think about things and how they've navigated similar challenges. And number two, they get empathy. And that's the biggest one, because men don't get a lot of that. And the most powerful two words in the English language are me too. And so that's what guys say is they'll tell us the biggest takeaway is they've learned by just observing how to communicate better. They take that out into their life. And then number two is just like feeling like they're not alone, like they're not some crazy person, the only crazy person with these challenges. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Out of curiosity, and maybe you don't know, how are men and women deal with these things differently?
You mean, what do you mean by these things, like adversities?
Well, yeah, just life, adversities, mindset issues,
yeah,
self-worth.
It's a good question. And I know that women face a lot of challenges and men face a lot of challenges. And I don't think they're super different. Like, I think there are, for example, men who are super expressive and there are women who are super shut down and don't have any community. But I think in general, the opposite is true. I think in general, there are women typically have less fear about sharing what's on their mind or their emotional experience with their friends. I think women also typically just seem to have more friends or more community, more outlets for that. So that's the primary difference I see.
So what are they doing differently to create that compared to men?
It's a really good question. I haven't really thought about that. My first instinct was like friendships, like on the level of being a confidant, being able to talk about this stuff, like the real stuff, requires a level of intimacy. And I don't mean physical intimacy, but I just mean closeness that men are afraid of. And so women aren't afraid to communicate in that way, because a woman communicating emotionally, crying, expressing her vulnerabilities, stuff she's afraid of, there's no judgment around that. So women just do that from a younger age for the most part. Now, mind you, some women really struggle with it. So it's not everybody, speaking kind of generalizations here, but I just think that women from an early age are better at doing that, which lays the groundwork for better friendships and closer connections, or at the very least, more outlets to be able to do that kind of thing. Whereas men, they're just scared to go there, and so they don't. And so they actually have opportunities with maybe a friend at work or an acquaintance at work or a guy from the basketball team, but they just don't take that initiative. And that's like a conversation that comes up in MensGroup is, hey, so these sweet guys will be like, and they could be like 18 or they could be 85. They'll be like, hey, I met a nice guy. How do I ask him to be my friend? Or how do I start talking about real meaningful things with them? You know, they're like really confused and scared to do that. And the answer is you just have to do it. And then you'll know if the person wants to go there or not. But I think it just speaks to the differences between men and women in this department, you know?
You know, it reminds me of something. And I read this a long time ago. It was like, men look at life as a football game. You come together, you get in the huddle, you talk, and then you go and you leave.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're here. We're done. All right, out.
Exactly.
Go back and do your thing.
Yeah, they treat it like shopping. You know, how do most men shop? It's like, go in and buy all of your stuff for the year in like 15 minutes and get the hell out of there. Yeah.
And you move on.
I think this is just a big blind spot for a lot of people, and especially a lot of men. They don't realize how unhealthy it is to put all your emotional and intimate needs into just your romantic partner and to not have other support pillars in place for like talking through things. And most men don't realize that until they get a divorce or whatever. And then they look around and they realize they have nobody, you know? But people don't realize it because, you know, we're living a good life. We're moving along. And ultimately society promotes junk food values. It's like money, status, Instagram followers. You know, it's not like how solid is your community.
Well, and because your community is now Instagram, right?
Yeah.
And they're doing everything they can to keep you there and keep you engaged. But again, likes are not friends.
The challenge is that at the end of the day, you're having a relationship with a screen, right? And like Harvard did this crazy study over 90 years that was like basically studying well-being and happiness in men. And they followed these kids from when they were born all the way up until they're 90 years now. And they figure out the number one determining factor in fulfillment and well-being and overall health is your community. It's your relationships.
That came out of the Harvard Grant study.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like anybody that thinks that they're doing fine without friends or doing fine without anybody to talk to, or, oh, I have friends on Instagram. It's like, no, that's not. The research shows that it's not doing it for you. And so I'd like to encourage people to just, whatever that looks like, like build those confidants, build that community so that you can talk about things like money, purpose.
And so some people will ask, is this something they can do on their own, or do they have to join a men's group?
You have to join a men's group. No, I'm kidding. For 3 easy payments of $99.99, I too can loop you in on a men's group. No, yeah, you can totally do it on your own. I mean, look, I had this group in Squam where I used to live in this town called Squamish, and it was just a bunch of guys. And it was this event we'd have every second Sunday night. It was called Philosophize with the Guys. And it was just a thing that my friend hosted where he'd invite over the same 5 guys, and we'd drink tea or sometimes drink beers and just shoot the shit about anything that we found interesting or, relevant. And it would sometimes turn into personal stuff. And so I think it can be really casual like that. It doesn't have to be super structured. But if you're not a natural community builder, if you don't know people that'd be interested in this kind of a thing, which is most guys, because they don't have friends to talk about the stuff in the first place. So like, how are you going to set it up? Then yeah, the easy step is just plug yourself into something like what we're doing. Now there's men's groups at your local church, at your local community center. Those are great. We find them a little stuffy or a little dry or a little bit of a mixed bag of characters, but like there's lots of options out there.
There truly are. People have to, I guess, get vulnerable and take that step. And I think that's a lot of what Brene Brown talks about, is that vulnerability of, and I think she was shocked early on with just how vulnerable men could be. Interesting.
Yeah. I did. Where'd you see that? Because that's really interesting to me. I'm not surprised, but I haven't heard that about her.
So I've been following her for a long time, and I think that came out from some of her very early work. Some of the videos she was doing in the early part, or it might have been like a talk that I had seen her at early on, where she mentioned that. I was part of another kind of semi-mastermind group, and every month we would get a speaker. And that's how I was introduced to her. She was one of the speakers.
Yeah, great.
And so that's what I remember from her, because that was kind of that was the beginning of when she was first coming out with all her work. And now she's a superstar.
Now she's a superstar. Yeah. And she was like one of the first people addressing vulnerability back then. And I feel like that started a bit of a movement, which is great.
That it has.
Yeah. And just one last point on just this topic, because I feel us moving on to another question. The good news is that if you're sitting there listening and you're thinking like, oh yeah, that could be me. Like I don't have a lot of people to talk to about the things that are on my mind. The good news is that this is, like you said, a societal level thing, like a cultural thing. And so there are so many people that are desperate for the same kind of connection that you're looking for. And so I just encourage people to like take the step, take a little bit of effort. Maybe if you have a friend at work or acquaintance at work, maybe share that personal thing. See how they respond. Like there are lots of people, whether it be through a men's group or maybe just in your life already, that actually do want to go a little bit deeper and talk about some real stuff.
Thank you for the encouragement. My thought was, are there topics that come up that you're aware of that we have not covered yet today?
In men's group?
Yeah, men's group, or just in living a better life.
Honestly, there's one trend that I see that I really want to share on in general. And it's that a lot of guys just don't feel that great about themselves. They feel a little bit low. They just have this like low self-worth stuff from their childhood, maybe from their parents or whatever. And so I see the guys that really move the needle and start to improve their lives and start to find more purpose, start to make more money. They're the guys that are willing to dig into those parts themselves. And explore that inner emotional part of themselves. The default ways we have of feeling about ourselves that are very subtle, but really do paint and filter like our daily experience. And so the guys that dig into that, like, because we're carrying that baggage around every single day, whether we like it or not, and it's clouding everything that we come across. So like the guys that really dig into that and go try to get to know that part of themselves and build a relationship with it and maybe try to cry some of it out in therapy or whatever, those are the guys that really start to succeed.
You know, it kind of reminds me, taking us back to the beginning. It's, if you listen, you'll hear the words.
Mm-hmm.
So like with your dad, can you afford that surfboard? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear it if you listen to people talk, they will tell you their underlying fears and their concerns. The thing is, most of us are either not listening or it's so ingrained that it seems natural to feel like that way. Yes.
That's how it was for me. So I was going through the world until about maybe like 5 years ago, like with this, just always feeling like I'm not good enough and interpreting events that are happening out there in the world as though they're about me. My perception was always that this is evidence that I'm not doing good enough, that I'm not good enough as a person. And that's because of how I was communicated with as a child. And my parents are great, but they use a lot of disapproval and shame and stuff like that to try to help me become a functioning little child. And so I went out in the world not feeling great about myself. And you hit the nail on the head. I didn't know any other way. So like I thought that was normal human experience, but it wasn't. Like this is polluting. This is making me be needy in relationships. This is making me be impulsive with money. It was making me people please and put my own self-care needs secondary. And it wasn't until I actually dug into that stuff and realized that that was at the center of all the behaviors I wanted to change, that like, that's when I started to A, feel better about myself and enjoy more of my life, and B, started to see more success.
You said it's a trend you're seeing. Is it then with younger guys or is it just in general?
Honestly, it's a lot of middle-aged guys. A lot of guys have good careers, families, maybe a relationship on the rocks, and they come to MensGroup to talk about that stuff. And then in talking, just sharing about their life, they happen to stumble into in conversation, oh, right, that conversation with my wife made me feel this way. I felt that way a lot of times before. Maybe it's not my wife. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's stuff that I have been feeling for a long time. And lots of the guys in MensGroup have been going through therapy. And so they're starting to share this perspective. And so it's just interesting how the guys who stick around seem to always end up in that territory. Like, oh, I have some stuff in my body and my nervous system, some ways of thinking and feeling about myself that are holding me back from being more fulfilled, living more purposefully, being more successful.
These conversations all come back to the same place. First is, I am not enough, right? And that is the underlying problem with all. You go to a psychologist, it's usually because I am not enough. I come at it from the money side. So I've come to realize that all our money scripts are programmed at a very early age. What I've come to realize is so is the rest of us.
Yes.
And so it's basically the same thing. What these men are saying is, hey, I got programming way back when that when this occurred, it set off this physical feeling, this emotional feeling in me, and it's getting triggered. And it's running subconsciously, and I've never fixed that trigger. I never challenged it as an adult and said, that's not true.
Yeah, that's not true. And I need to work on this because it's messing up my relationships, or it's messing up my finances, or it's messing up my, connecting with my kids or whatever. Yeah.
It's all connected.
It is. And that to me is the real work. Like if I could give one piece of advice, it'd be that life is an inside job. It just seems like the more that I get into that stuff, and a lot of people, like we get a lot of YouTube comments from guys that are like not into this stuff. And they're like, oh, you're a pussy. You're leading men in the wrong direction. But I've just seen in my own life that the more I get into that stuff, the feelings, the ways I felt about myself as a child, my inner child, I guess you could say, the less I'm triggered through the world, the happier I am, the more success I've been seeing. It's like lightening the load. Like I'm not carrying on this big bag of, feelings anymore. I just get it out and then it's done. And then, and then I can go back to doing purposeful work or, making money or whatever.
It's funny that they watch long enough to leave the comment. You think, right? There's something they know.
I know. Yeah. We get troll. Oh yeah. They know. It's usually the people that they're most vocal online are the ones that are not only they're trying to sell people around them, they're trying to sell themselves on their way of viewing the world, So this guy's like, obviously we get a lot of guys hating on our videos that are in the red pill and MGTOW communities, which are men going their own way. These are men who they feel like they've been hurt by women or the court systems. And so they're basically hating on women, and they're big communities of guys who just write off women completely or whatever. And they basically love trolling our posts because they really strongly, they're trying to sell themselves that, I think deep down they know that forsaking all relationships is not the right answer, but they're trying to sell themselves that is the right answer because it's an easy way to keep them away from future potential pain,
Or the reflection in the mirror.
The reflection in the mirror. You're responsible for this just as much as your partner was. A lot of guys don't want to hear that.
No, they don't. And that's so true. We always like to get people to take action. What's an action step people can take this week to move forward in their life?
I gotta go in a counterintuitive direction here. And it's following a guy that I love, Ryan Holiday, who's like an author and a Stoic philosopher. He talks a lot about stillness is the key and how the only way out of things is through them. And I think for a lot of guys, especially, our tendency can just be to move and keep going and take an action step. But honestly, the most beneficial action I've seen in my life is to actually block out time for stillness. So if you were going to take one actually intentional stillness, I should say, time to think, to feel into and to think about whatever might be on your mind or is quietly bothering you right now. Like right now, there's 2 things in my life, or 3, that I'm actually not super satisfied with. The way I'm eating right now, this is my personal stuff. I keep fighting with my girlfriend in the waves when we surf together. We don't fight anywhere else, but whenever we surf, we fight. And then some work stuff. And it's I haven't blocked out any time to actually sit and feel into that, to figure out what I need and why I'm getting upset. And I think that's a lot of people's tendency. So my one action step would be to take some time and feel into things.
And that's a perfect action step, taking time to think, because it's what most people don't do. They don't take the time to carve out time to just be still with a pad and paper or whatever works for you, and to think about some of life's bigger questions. It's funny you said surfing, because in the last episode, we talked about the surfer doesn't try to change the ocean. They have to find the wave and learn to ride what they're given and look for that opportunity. But they never try to change the ocean.
No. We might swear at the ocean or get frustrated that the ocean isn't working in the way that we want, but that's futile. Yeah. You can't change the ocean.
You can't change the ocean. It's just like you can't change the world, so to speak. You can make a difference, but it's hard to make a big difference. But you can make little differences, and little differences compound, and they add up over time.
Yeah, they really do. And the little differences sometimes end up, I can see them making a bigger difference, So I have lots of friends because of the men's group for entrepreneurs that I ran who've accomplished huge things. But then we'll go out to dinner and they'll be a dick to the waiter. So it's like, who's actually making the world a better place,
That's what I watch. I watch for the little things. How do they treat the waiter? What's the words under their breath? What are the little comments that snort out that most people just ignore? Because they tell me a much bigger story. Yeah.
Ultimately, what I've learned from Men's Group is that most people don't have a very happy home life, And so that's all I care about. It's like, how happy am I day to day? How content am I with my relationship? How day to day am I doing the things that give me joy? It's like, those are the things that matter, not these big lofty. I mean, it's nice to do meaningful things like Men's Group or what you're doing, Rocky. But at the end of the day, that doesn't give me that much more joy than another job. I'd say that what gives me joy is just the simple like life things, rolling around with my dog, having a nice conversation with my girlfriend, watching a sunset, surfing in the morning when the birds and the sea lions are out in the water with me. Yeah.
Simple life. We all chase big, and the reality is we don't need all of that.
Well, and what I saw from a lot of these guys in the Brotherhood, that entrepreneur group, is that often, and the guys got into this stuff, in our men's circles, like often that drive to create big, lofty things isn't coming from a healthy place. That'd be another piece of advice I give that I've observed is like, it's good to set goals and to create things like MensGroup, but also like be honest and real about where that's coming from. Because for most of my life, I chose work not from what I was good at or what felt good to me. I chose work from what would sound the best to other people. Mm. So I was a professional DJ, or like a tech entrepreneur. I'm not a tech guy. I'm a counselor. I just want to talk about my feelings all day. It's like, I should have been doing that. So yeah, just be a lot careful with those big lofty goals, because I think sometimes they can actually lead us astray from who we really are and what we're really good at and the true impact we can have in the world.
Great advice. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Sorry for the pause. It's just that's something I've always struggled with, is abundant mindset. What's my secret to living an abundant life? I think number one, it's actually exercising gratitude, because our minds are geared towards problems, as we talked about earlier, and focusing on what's going wrong. As a safety mechanism, defense mechanism. So consciously like doing gratitude exercises and stuff. And I think number two, it's just like taking the stillness and the time to get clear on what I actually want. And then number three is going after it and trusting that it's going to be okay. It's like a lot of people look at my life and they're like, wow, you got to live at the beach. Wow, you have a beautiful partner. Wow, you have this cool, meaningful business now. All these things I've done. It's like, yeah, I had to set out and do those, and it was really difficult. I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I had to face a lot of rejection. It's like, so it is also about being intentional here. But I think that'd be the three things to live an abundant life. Be number one, exercise gratitude all the time. We all have so much to be grateful for. It's the most peaceful time in human history. We live such a good, cushy life. Even just 100 years ago, life was so hard for humans. And then number two would be, take the time to get clear on what you want. Number three, go after it.
Excellent advice. And yeah, everyone sees the results. Nobody sees the blood, sweat, and tears behind it.
Yeah. And the more meaningful and the more exciting the result is, typically the more hardship and sacrifice you have to make, I found.
So true. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I think it's the self-worth stuff and the emotional stuff. Like, I wish I'd started focusing on that earlier, because I probably would have made some better decisions that would have created less adversity for myself, and would have had less of a hard time with relationships and stuff like that. Yeah. Just learned how, I wish somebody taught me about how the emotions worked and how this childhood, programming works and stuff like that. I really wish I'd gone into my internal world earlier.
Another subject they forgot to teach in school.
Yes, that's the most important one, because that'll ruin anything, any other part of life if not handled,
Speaking of childhood, if you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would say, man, you got or guy or girl. You got so much time. Like at 18, I was so focused on making a mark in the world and becoming something. And honestly, I wish I just floated around and tried things. Like some of the best, most successful people I know didn't really hit their stride until their late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, sometimes even later. And typically that's when men start to earn a lot and stuff is in their 40s. And I wish I was a little bit less focused on that and a little bit more focused on exploration. Just getting out there, getting to know myself, getting to know the world, figuring out how I fit into it, just trying a lot of different things. I was really focused on these big projects and career and stuff. And I kind of wish I just went and worked on a whale watching boat to learn about the ocean, or became a surf instructor for a bit, or did landscaping and planted trees. That looks kind of fun when I drive by those guys, I don't know. Yeah. Get out there and explore.
It looks fun.
Yeah, it does look fun. But the reason why that exploration is so important is not only is it fun and you're making the most of those young years when you have all the energy, you're gathering data, right? About what you like and what you don't like.
Mm.
We have these ideas that are programmed by our parents or by people around us of what we think we want to do, but often people don't actually enjoy it. So a lot of people become lawyers and they don't like being lawyers. A lot of people will become doctors and they don't actually like being doctors. So I think gathering as much of that data as possible early on, data around career, data around relationships, data around money, data around lifestyle. I mean, that can only serve you moving forward.
So very true. Knowing what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you like, because
Totally.
It helps you to actually, it's hard to know what you like. It's a lot easier to know what you don't like. And it helps to steer you in that direction and move you towards it. So from that standpoint, it's definitely an excellent way to go. If people would like to learn more about you and the Men's Group, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's just mensgroup.com. That's it. We have a men's community there, online men's groups. You can check them out for free or on a trial. There's a bunch of great resources there, book recommendations and podcasts. And we have our own podcast, pretty active YouTube channel. So just mensgroup.com.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rocky. This is great.
Have you ever thought of being part of a group? I wonder how it could help you to achieve your goals. Are there parts of your life you keep bottled up that you wish you could talk to others about and get some advice by people who've already walked that path? We're meant to be in tribes, but you got to find yours. They aren't assigned like they used to be. This week's action step was to block out time for intentional stillness to think about whatever is on your mind. I have to tell you, thinking time is so massive for results. Who would have thought that just a little bit of thinking could take you so far? But it seems everyone's either stuck on autopilot or distracted. And then they wonder why they end up where they end up. I encourage you, block out the time, even if it's just a few minutes to start. Like we chatted about, It's amazing how much you can think about in the shower. Well, where else can we do that? Next week, we've got on Chris Prefontaine. He's back to chat about how to build and scale your team. He runs a business with his family. And so we chat about that too. How do you integrate your family into your business? I am sure you will enjoy it. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, who else could benefit from it? Would you mind sharing? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.